G'day. Today's video is about a problem of my own making. A friend of mine is helping restore a steam engine and had a very poor quality drawing to work from, and so I decided I'll do him a favour and redraw it. And once I redrew it, I thought actually that'd be an interesting little pattern to make, so I made the pattern. This video is about making that pattern and some of the rules and things you need to think about when doing a pattern.
This is the drawing that we started with. I think it's the original drawing, and as it says on there, new pattern. It's pretty rough, and so the first step was to try and recreate this so that we could get a look at what the part was going to be and put some more dimensions on it. At work I have access to a 3D modelling package, so that's what I use. So the first step here was to make the flange, followed by putting the boss on the base of it. Then the boss on top, then extruding the part that I refer to as the swan neck for the actual stop. Once that was on, I then went round and put some radii on that to smooth that out and also make it suitable for casting. Then the final step was to put the button on front. Now these are all dimensions to match up to the old drawing. There's nothing there that I've added on, but just to get what does the real part look like. This is the end result. It's a drawing with the standard 3 views, as well as an isometric and a few dimensions. I've got both imperial and metric dimensions on there because the steam engine fraternity use imperial dimensions. I usually think in metric dimensions for this sort of thing. It doesn't matter, but as you can see, it looks something like what it should.
When making up a pattern for casting, there are 3 things I guess you need to bear in mind. First of all, parts need to have draft on them, and so I'm going to be making those faces there around about 3 degrees. It doesn't have to be exact, but at least 3 degrees gives the part a chance of coming out of the die. You need to have a machining allowance on there so that if you've got a machine surface like I have there and there, you need at least 3 millimeters on that so that it'll machine nicely. You don't get any sand inclusions on your machine surface and all that sort of thing. And I guess the other thing that you need to bear in mind is shrinkage. For a part this size, I'm not overly concerned about shrinkage. It's usually 2-3%, but it can vary a little bit. If this was a large part, if I was trying to cast a part which was say 1 metre long, I'd probably want to have some shrinkage in there, otherwise I'd come up way short. But just something to bear in mind. For small parts, maybe not such a big issue because it's going to be swamped by machining allowances and all that sort of thing, but for large parts, definitely something to think about. Looking at the part, there's a symmetry here, and what I propose doing is making sort of the parting line. That's how the original looks like it was made. This surface and that surface are machined, as are the holes through there, and probably a bit of spot facing for the back. Now I'm not going to worry about the holes because that involves some sort of core, and usually for a small hole you wouldn't be bothered, because by the time you add some material on to cover the shrinkage and the thickness of the cast, all that sort of thing, not worth doing. So the other thing is that because this is machined in here, what I want to do is actually bring that across like that, right? Leave this surface as cast and make that flange extra thick, because I'm going to machine that away. I might as well do it that way. So I'm going to start with the flange, and I'll make up basically that shape. Now, for most castings that you and I will do, the shrinkage is around about 2%. Across here might be worth thinking about. For some of the smaller detail, probably not. But I will make that just a little bit larger to allow for that. I have measured some castings before against patterns for shrinkage, and sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. So I don't think it's necessarily a uniform thing. It takes a lot more brains about this than I've got, but let's see how we go. So first thing is the casting. The parting line is going to run through the middle. So what I'll do is basically a half flange, or in fact 2 half flanges, and I can then put those together and make up the full flange with that. I have my linisher set up here vertically. Normally it lives horizontally, and most of the time I'll use that, but I just find for making patterns having it vertical is quite useful. And so I've gone along and shaped my two flange halves, right? So they now look something like a flange. I need to put a bevel on there, or a chamfer, or whatever you want to call it, a angular relief, because the plane of parting is going to be this way, and so for that to come out of the sand mould, I need to put something on there. But before I do that, I want to do the little gooseneck bit that comes up in the middle. Now that's going to be tricky-ish, because that has to come up, 8mm on each side here. So I'm going to have to do some cutting and put that in. I've got a rectangular hole in my flange for the swan neck to come out. Remembering that level is all the way across there, so that's what that is. Okay, but I still need to put that swan neck in, and I need to do it in two halves because the mould parts that way. So what I'm going to do is use a trick that was taught to me by my wood carving instructor. What I've got here is a 1-to-1 drawing of it. So that's 1-to-1 scale. I've got a bit of stuff that I'm going to put it onto, and what I'm going to do is use some old-fashioned carbon paper. So I put some carbon paper in there, trace around it, and that'll give me the shape, and then I can finish that up on the linisher and put all the radii and all that sort of stuff, and that should be good. I'll then glue that in, and this is a little bit thicker than the slot. This is 12 and the slot is 8, and so I can then use the linisher to bring that back to that flush face, so I get a nice good fit there. For those of you not in the know, carbon paper is a way of copying from one piece of paper to another. It was used when people used typewriters, before computers, before printers and photocopiers, and so you'd sandwich that between two pages, and the impact of the typewriter or someone's pen on the first sheet would then give a mark on the second sheet. I'm going to line it up on my piece of wood like that, put that there. I'm going to have to get a bigger bit of wood, I think, because this one's not quite big enough. No, I'll do it this way. So all I'm doing is basically scribing along the line and we'll probably come up there, I think. Right. And as you can see, I get a shape. So I'll cut that out. I'll make another one and get them so they fit, and then I can put some radii on. The radii starts there. So round that bit, round this bit, and then that can get glued in and sanded back. I've glued my swan necks in. I've put a couple of nails there just to hold things together, and then I've gone and put that in the sander and taken that back to the right thickness. Now I just need to put radius on there and a radius in there, and as you can see, that fits together quite nicely. And then once I've got that done, it's putting that button on the front. Got a bit ahead of myself. I've just realised that I should have put the 3-degree relief on here before I put these parts in, because I can't get in there with the linisher. So I'm going to have to get in there and linish those parts and then clean up this bit here with a file. I can do these back surfaces. The other thing I probably should have done earlier, but I didn't, was put in the pins. that keep the halves of the pattern together. I've put them in now, and they're not too bad, but I'll need to just touch up that edge there. I wanted to get that in there so when I do the final finishing of this swan neck, I can make sure that everything lines up and it's going to be a smooth part. But as it is, yeah, it works. It's okay. So I'll just do a little bit of remedial work there and finish that up. I've made up the button to go on the end. That'll just glue onto there. What I'll probably end up doing is putting a piece of Glad wrap in between the two halves and the two bits of button, and that's just so that if any glue does get into the wrong spot, it's not going to stop the thing coming apart. So I'll glue that on and then let that dry and then give it a bit of a smooth with some sandpaper. Before I do that though, I've got to put the 3-degree surfaces on here and on here. Now that's around about 2 millimeters over that distance, so it's not much. I think I've shown this before. This is my Toolmaker square. I've set that to 3 degrees off vertical, and then I've arranged the linisher belt so that it's matching that. And so if on the table of the linisher, when I present that, that should give me a 3-degree grind there. I'll have to be careful here how I do it, and on this side, and then finish that off with a file or with a hand linisher or something like that. But that will then give me that. I can glue the button on. The only other thing I've got to do then is put a sprue on the back here. Now, I was a bit mystified by this. You can see it on the drawing just there, what exactly that does. And then I worked out that probably what it was is, as well as being a sprue to feed the casting, it was probably also put there so that you could grab onto that with a chuck and turn these faces. So a cunning idea. So I need to put that on there so that we can still, grab this thing, turn it, all that sort of thing. But yes, it's coming together. I've got the buttons gluing onto the end of the swan necks here. I was going to use some Glad wrap, but I found some waxed baking paper which seemed to like it to do the job. And so I'm just gluing those on there. Once that's all glued up, I'll file, I'll put some filler and all that sort of thing. However, the way I made those things wasn't just to get a round piece of stock, cut it in half and glue it on. If I did that, what I'd have is a round piece of stock, sort of, because the saw cut coming out of there means that it wouldn't work properly. So what I'm going to do is the same I'm going to be doing with these stubs, is that I'll put a centre line across and then cut and sand to that centre line so that when these things are together, they will make up a circle, okay? And so I don't have that saw cut in there. I'll do that. I'll then put a 3-degree bevel on that, and I can stick that on the back here, and that should give me my complete pattern. There it is, the finished pattern, bar a little bit of filler and a coat or two of paint. The paint is just there to stop the fibres swelling up and make sure it doesn't catch in the sand. So a couple of coats of sealing white was what I was told was all that was needed. Nothing too special, doesn't have to be anything wonderful. The pins that join the two halves together, they should both be in the same side. I'm going to have to use a bit of glue on this one. Now that I've finished, that's not such a terrible thing. They don't have to be very long though, they just have to be long enough to locate the two halves together. So just remember that. As far as timber choice goes, I once made a pattern out of some Meranti, and that wasn't a very good idea at all. It's a soft material, but it's also very fibrous, and it was horrible to try and get a decent finish. So this is just a bit of standard Pinus radiata from the shop, hardware shop. That's a bit of pine as well. That's a bit of Australian oak. So there's nothing special there. It's just what was on hand and how it's all going to work. Thanks for watching, and see you for the next one.